Well, as I had mentioned earlier, tonight we're going to be tackling taming corruption, and experts I have in studio are part of the Multi-Sectoral Initiative Against Corruption. So on my immediate left, we have Engineer Patrick Obath, who is a convener of the Multi-Sectoral Initiative Against Corruption, and on the far end is Bishop Warari, who is a Vice Chair of KBC. Welcome, gentlemen. When you talk about corruption, we need to put this into perspective. When people hear about the cost of corruption, especially in the economy, we think about numbers. But as we are about to find out, is that it goes beyond the numbers. So let's put this into perspective. The vice corruption has been something that we have been peddling, pointing fingers, blame game. Is this the high time that we changed how we're tackling corruption? Obath.
Yes, I think for too long we have seen initiatives that have led into big conferences, and then resolutions are made, and it's always about this institution should do this, that department should do something else, the police should do something else, and all those resolutions go and gather dust. And we have a conference 2 years later, and we come up with the same resolutions. The Multi-Sectoral Initiative Against Corruption is basically saying we don't want to do the same thing. We want to change the way we are going to tackle corruption. And that is to not look at other people, but to look at our individual organizations, our individual selves, and say, what can I do to stop corruption? But not only that, but the whole heart of it is to say, how do I corrupt? As an individual, as an organization, as a sector.
Now, as captains of industry, we've already seen documents, policy papers coming out and saying that corruption is really weighing heavily on the economy, Kenya's economy. So what, can you paint a picture, tell us maybe in detail how it has affected the business environment, and especially when you look at the ranking by Transparency International, really Kenya is really ranked very low in terms of corruption at 143, position 145. So how does this augur among investors? Has it affected Kenya's attractiveness in the eyes of investors? Warari?
Well, thank you so very much. I would like to start by saying my name is Bishop John Warari.
Warari, sorry.
Yeah, and I'm representing the religious sector. We collaborate, we work together with the private sector. And indeed, corruption is a cancer. And it has been taking a lot of our revenue. We are told our budget up to 1 trillion shillings. And I want to believe my friend and brother Obath will enlighten us more on that. And when people lose confidence, when doing business becomes hard because of corruption, when service delivery is delayed or it's not there at all, it demoralizes. The investors are very sensitive, and they would want to come because they're interested. They are going to put in their money, and they want something out of it. So corruption has done us a lot of harm, and we are very, very grateful that Kenyans have reached that point when they feel that enough is enough, and we can wake up and change for the better.
So it's not all lost in as far as investor attractiveness is concerned. Can we salvage where we are? And from where you're captains of industry, Obath, you have a background in business in the private sector, and you too, sir. What can we do, or where we are, what strategies are you intending to lay out to change this narrative, given that it is heavily impacting on the growth of the economy? Obath.
I think the first thing that happened when we talked to the president about 3 years ago, when this issue came up, the private sector actually went ahead and drafted an anti-corruption bill, which has already been passed by Parliament. Unfortunately, the regulations that are going to give that bill life have not yet been completed. And that is why the bill is, and the act is not yet effected. And we are aware that the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission is drafting those regulations, but they have to complete them and give that act life. Because that way, as a private sector, we said we need laws that are actually going to police us. And that is the one that is then going to have the punitive action for those who sort of aid and abet corruption in the private sector. So that is something that we did voluntarily as a private sector to try and minimize the impact of corruption that is caused by us paying out bribes.
Very well said. You've mentioned the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, and there have been calls to give, or rather equip, the EACC and the Auditor General's Office with prosecutorial powers so that we can tame corruption. What's your take?
Well, I want to believe that we should strengthen our institutions, because these commissions that, and there are about 11 or so, they have been put there so that there can be a proper flow of services, there can be clarity, there can be equity and all that. And so we are very, very grateful that these commissions are now again regaining what they had formerly lost. And we in the religious sector, we held last year, September, National Dialogue Conference, where we were looking at different sectors and believing that if we strengthen them, because there are a lot of regulations that have been there, there are laws that have been there, Chapter 10, Article 10 and Chapter 6, issues of ethos and values, they've always been there. And what we're encouraging people is that they should look inside. I, as a bishop, am I corrupt?
So what you're saying, sir, is that we should look at corruption as a moral issue.
Correct.
And an individual, you have to make a personal and individual decision to not be corrupt.
Excellent. That is what we should do. Like there is some example in the Bible, if you allow me to quote the good book, that is in the book of Luke chapter number 15. There was this father who had 2 sons. And one son went home and said, I need my part, I need my cut, and I need it now. There was nothing wrong in his getting his cut, there was nothing wrong, but I think he hurried it. And then after that, he was not prepared. He didn't know how to spend money. He had not actually known the value. He had not known what it is to earn money. And he got it. And what did he do? He went into the city and misused it. And then, when it dwindled and he had nothing, he came into his senses. And that is what we are asking Kenyans. Let's pause and ask ourselves, are we going to allow this vice, this cancer, to continue eating us? Why don't we arise, face it? So when this young man came into his senses, he said, I'm not doing good. So I want to ask our beloved nation, our leaders of all categories, are we being good to ourselves when we give and accept bribes, when we corrupt, when we throw morals and values through the window? What we are doing, we are actually digging a hole in our ship, and it is said it's not the water in the ocean that sinks the ship, but the water that comes into the ship. And if we sink, we are all going to suffer. And so I believe Kenyans have come to that level where they feel enough is enough. We in the religious sector. And I've talked, and we've come together with the private sector. We've talked with so many people, and they feel now this is the time we ask ourselves hard questions so that we can get proper answers and start afresh. Remember, when this young man went back home, the father was waiting for him. I heard the other day, incidentally, this was a leader, a spiritual leader, who said that the corrupt should be, they should face firing squad in Uhuru Park. I said, no, it shouldn't. I think
it has come to that level where Kenyans are really tired with the state of affairs in as far as corruption is concerned. And not just to cut you off or digress, is that that also comes with a lot of responsibility, especially with the on executive arm and also the judiciary. Just to quote what the Chief Justice David Maraga said, is that he said that it's not on the onus of the magistrate, or rather the courts, but the prosecution has to bring in watertight cases so that these persons can be prosecuted. Now the question is the legal system punitive enough to deter would-be perpetrators of corruption? Or do we still have to do something more to dissuade people from actually participating in corrupt activities? Obath?
I think the whole process of finding a malfeasance, then collecting the evidence, and then being able to prepare the bundles, the committal bundles, and then taking through a prosecutorial process, and then getting a conviction. That whole value, that whole chain has all got to be done with a set of principles. I don't think we need any more new regulations and laws. If everybody did their part with integrity and honesty and applied themselves properly, then we would be getting convictions. We wouldn't be having the conversation we're having now about the judiciary is not doing its job, the prosecutor should bring his, a watertight case, and so forth and so on. I am a professional as a prosecutor. I have got to come to a point whereby I know that what I am taking there will stand the test. But it also relies on the judiciary to be clean. And what we have done in this multi-sectoral initiative is to get every professional sector to say, in our own sector, how do we do corruption? If I'm a judge, and we ask the judiciary to do the same exercise that we as a private sector and the religious sector have done, and bring the judges together and say, amongst ourselves, how do we do corruption in the judiciary? It's a hard question to ask. But if we cannot answer that question ourselves, nobody can. Because
So
if you bring somebody from outside, right, and I'm an engineer professionally, it is only an engineer who knows how an engineer can corrupt. You can bring in the ESCC, you can bring in the police, you can bring all those people. But I am the professional.
So setting standards within the various sectors.
The standards are there. It is introspection. We've got to sit as a profession or as a company and have an honest conversation amongst ourselves to say, in company X, and I can give an example, right, which I've quoted quite often as we go around talking to different sectors. We know things that we do that are the seeds that start corruption. And once we recognize that within our own selves, within our own company, we start cutting that out. And when we do that, then when we go out now to the people we interact with, we tell them, no, we can't do that. And then they know they can't come in and expect to corrupt us. And if we do it that way, work from the inside outwards, we will have a much better chance of fighting corruption rather than saying, let's make the laws harder, let's make the fines more, whatever it is. I mean, the minute you do that, people are going to ask for more money. And
so
you're
fighting
going to
corruption from within and not without.
Yeah.
That's
bigger fines means bigger, I'll ask for more money, to sort of look the other way.
There have been calls by various sections actually to introduce an education policy that emphasizes on social ethics as a compulsory subject right from primary school all through to university, so that we can deter the new generation and away from matters corruption. What's your take, Bishop?
I want to believe that is the right way to go, and the church has been doing it. In fact, we have books that we have printed on ethics and values, and we have had memorandum of understanding with EACC and the Kenya, what do we call the KIE, the former KIE, Kenya
KICD.
KICD. They are looking at it, that they are coming up with curriculum that will be teaching on issues of ethics and morals. And I must say that there was an example given that during a primary school elections of, they are now electing, the pupils are electing their presidents, that a parent gave a child who was a candidate a packet of sweets to go and pass it over in the primary school.
Yes.
And indeed, he won. So where is the problem? Is the problem with the kid or the problem is with the parent?
Well, we'll argue, but obviously the parent, and
Yes.
you see, the parent there is on a moral ground. You're the one who's supposed to lead your child or rather guide your child to the right path. But now, question is, Bishop, we've seen the churches have also been involved in matters corruption.
Yes.
So is the church ready to deal with its errant members in as far as corruption is concerned?
Very good.
Are you ready?
A good question. Are we ready? We have always been ready. And I know there are isolated cases, and I will not mention names. And in Kenya, we have penal codes. If a particular pastor is caught up in a criminal case, we've urged the government to go for him or her, not to offer a blanket blame that the church or the priests or so are they not able to go for pastor or a Bishop X or Y who has been doing ABC? By the way, we do have a self-regulation code of conduct. As I come from Evangelical Alliance of Kenya, and evangelicals, there are very many in Kenya to the tune of 8 million members. And the thing is, if I, as a bishop, have been caught on the wrong side of the law, I should be corrected or punished as an individual. So yes, and let me tell you here, we are all affected by this disease called corruption. It is in the private sector, it is in the media,
Yes.
it is in the
It
security.
actually cuts across.
It does cut across. But going back to my story in Luke chapter number 15, let me tell you what. The young man came into his senses and he felt, I'm going down the drain. So he now was on his way up again. That is where we are. That is where the multi-sectoral initiative is. We are saying it is doable. We are saying we can salvage this nation. We should not lose hope. We should not say we have corruption in the media, we have corruption in the religious sector, so we are hopeless. No, there is hope. Like my friend Engineer Obath has always said, and he's saying here, that we look inward. The young man looked inward and he saw hope. So when we look inward, if I'm a politician and I'm corrupting my followers, I'm getting into, for example, in the business world, they get into corrupt practices. This is the time to stop.
We look in with as we're tackling matters of corruption.
Yes,
Now
yes.
let me rope in and we bring in, you have a background in matters of business and the issue of illicit financial outflows. This is where Kenya, I remember some time last year, government had even given a tax amnesty and Kenyans lined up and really participated in this, and we even had an extension. But there have been calls for Kenya to have kind of treaties with tax havens so that we can, or rather, block this trend. What is your take about it? Is this a welcome move?
It's been happening. We have a case that is in court at the moment, and it's quite well known, where there was a tax issue. There were some people who spirited money out, and they were sort of found guilty on the other side, and they wanted to be extradited to that part of the world, and the case is still in court in this country, right? I'm not going to say whether it's right or wrong, but that means that there's obviously an agreement around extradition for people to go and face the law in other countries.
What is your take also, just to add up, what is your take on repossession on ill-gotten wealth, proceeds of corruption? The president has been very vocal about this. What's your take on that?
It is, I mean, just let me take a cynical view of that, right? If the people who spirited their money away into other places were gracious enough to bring that money back here, and even if they didn't give it back, they invested it in Kenya, that would be better than investing it somewhere else. So even if they're allowed to come here, keep 50%, but they're told invest it in Kenya and start building businesses, create employment, That would be better than stashing that money in a secret account in the Cayman Islands or in Switzerland or wherever it is, right? So my own skepticism, let them bring the money back here, let them repent, let them say, yeah, put my hand up, I stole some money, but at least let me keep some of it, I'll give some back, and at least I would undertake to invest it and use it properly in this country.
Since we're going
If we
this
do
route,
that, right, and allow these people some sort of dignity as thieves, I think we will get very, very far in this country.
Now, just to rope you in on that discussion, there have also been calls to have a lifestyle audit for any person who is actually taking up office before and after they've taken up a public office. What's your take, Bishop?
It should be so. Because actually we are stewards. In whichever position you are vying for, you are a servant who is taking care of the nation's wealth, and you should not enrich yourself in a corrupt manner. So, lifestyle audit, if there are some doubts about my life, I want to go through it. In fact, it's a welcome thing. But should we go that far? Why shouldn't we look inside and say, if I find a phone on some table, I will not take it. In fact, if I would take it, I would take it up and ask, who is the owner? We must have values. And we have had enough law and policies and all that. What we need to do is, like my brother has said, we have a change of heart. We repent, and we be given safe space. Now, the church, the mosque, and the temples, they are safe spaces. For example, the other day, a young man returned a gun, a pistol, in one of our churches in Githurai. And that young man had reached his end. He didn't know what to do, because if you're found with a gun, you're going to face the music. So he brought the gun, and the pastor there called the OCPD, and they discussed, and the young man was interrogated, and he was set free.
Safe spaces.
Safe space, that's what we need.
Now we are upcoming actually next week, around the 24th and the 25th of this month. Yeah. The National Anti-Corruption Conference is going to be held at the Bomas of Kenya. This is an initiative, rather themed Pamoja Tuangamize Ufisadi. This is an initiative of the Multi-Sectoral Initiative Against Corruption. So what is its objective, and who can participate? What do you intend to get out of this? We are doing things differently, looking within to tackle corruption. Obath.
The conference is premised on a very simple philosophy. Every sector that is going to participate, and we've just started with a few, and this is going to extend across the country. Each sector that is going to participate there has already had an introspection. They've talked amongst themselves and discussed, how do we do corruption? The professionals have done it. I'll give an example of some of the things that have come out. They've done it, and they've said, this is how corruption happens and amongst our professionals. So what are we going to do to prevent it from happening? How are we going to hold our professionals, ourselves accountable as a team to stop ourselves doing it? And they've come up with some remedial measures and also some punitive measures and a code of conduct, and they're basically going to ensure that they're going to change the laws that affect some of the professions, so that they incorporate some of the discussions that they've had into the law, so that it is there, especially when the profession is governed by law. Some of them are professions that are governed by a code of conduct, so the code of conduct is being modified to take care of that. An example I'll give, which is just a common thing that happens to most of us. And this came out of a very simple thing where I was talking to a set of bankers, and I asked them whether they considered a very simple thing as corruption. I want a loan. And I come in and I say, I want a loan to repair my car. And the banker says, we do not give loans to repair cars. But as somebody I know, why don't you change your requirement to say you want to repair your house? That will find some, we'll find some sympathy. So as a bank employee, I tell my customer that that is not right, do it this way, knowing full well that the guy is going to use it for something different. This happens day in, day out in almost every single bank in this country. And I can tell you, when I said that, people put their hands up and said, yes, I've done it. That is the start of corruption, because you've actually aided and abetted a change of something to facilitate another thing happening.
Yeah.
Yet it appears to be something that is okay. Now, when you start at that level, how quickly will it take for you to grow from that level to helping the NYS people as a bank person, right? So that is the kind of introspection you're looking for. As a bank, can we talk amongst ourselves as employees of the bank and leadership to see what is it that we do on a day-to-day basis that starts the corruption? So it is that kind of conversation that we are asking every sector to look at and then stop those things from happening.
Bishop,
Yeah.
this conference, going forward, what impact, what perceived impact do you think it's going to have going forward in the fight against corruption?
I would like to say fighting corruption will not and cannot be just an event, say through our Bomas of Kenya 2-day conference. It is a process. We have to again look inside, locate the problem, and bring in the solution. It's not going to be overnight. It's going to be painful. We have to admit facts that are hard, like what we have something called Magna Carta, that we are all equal before the law. There are some people who feel they cannot subject themselves to stopping at the red light because
big fish mentality.
Yes, big fish mentality. Because our children are watching. When I come with my convoy of cars and I pass the red lights, and my daughter is watching. When I get a position, she will urge me on. You know you are Mheshimiwa, don't stop, move on. So I want to believe that this will be the beginning of good things. The conference is a step in the right direction, and it's going to be hard to change, but the rewards are far much reaching for posterity. I want to believe, because every one of us would want to leave this nation a better place than we found it. Can we pay the price? Can we obey the rules, the codes, the regulations? Can we strengthen the institutions? Can we respect the police? Because nowadays it appears like we feel if I'm stopped by a police officer, I can fix him, I can fix her. Can we respect our courts? And when we do that, then, and in fact, going back to our culture, do you know in some of our Kenyan cultures, we don't even have the word corruption. Really, it just came in the other day and it's overtaken us, and our house is upside down. So what I would urge is that let's participate in this big conference. We've always repeatedly said here, it is a time of looking inward. We don't want to point fingers to the government, to the courts, to the securities. No. What we are saying is we have all been infected by this disease, and we want to be tested, just like the HIV. There were times we were stigmatizing everyone.
And we took up a campaign and we said it begins with you. And
Yes.
I think it has worked in the fight against that pandemic.
Yes,
As
it
we
has.
come to close, Patrick Obath, Engineer Patrick Obath, we've seen the taxmen actually yesterday revealed that they want to increase their revenue base to around 2 trillion shillings per year between now and 2022. There have been calls of widening the tax bracket to rope in the informal sector. The question is, are Kenyans really willing taxpayers? Because the question, there's been a lot of antipathy among the taxpayers that government collects our taxes but misappropriates it and uses it. Matters of corruption. From this point of view, looking at from an economist point of view, rather business point of view, what should we do to encourage Kenyans to actually participate or rather pay taxes? And also, where is the taxman failing in dealing with this antipathy among taxpayers?
I'll give a story, and that for me illustrates it better. I was in the Netherlands about 4 months ago. We were in a taxi being taken to the hotel, and it's a hotel that I'd stayed in some time back. And as we were coming there to the taxi, I said, the last time I was here, there was some roadworks being done here. And the taxi driver said, yes, we all agreed that they should use our tax money to make that road repair. And that was a taxi driver talking about the fact that they were involved in the decision on how their tax was going to be spent. That is where we need to come to as a nation. The tax that we pay, we will pay it willingly if we can see the impact that that tax is having. And the key thing is that we should not see it having people getting bigger salaries, and I'm talking about a certain institution in this country where people are increasing their salaries every time. If we don't see the money that we've given to the government through tax being taken away by corruption, if it is all spent on putting toilets and running water in Gikomba with properly paved streets, and you find street lighting in all the places in the informal settlements in this country, if you begin to find free health services that we're struggling to put in the country now, if you begin to sort of finance affordable housing, all these things that the president is struggling to do, if we were all trusting that the taxes would be used in the right way, every single Kenyan would say, I want to pay tax. But until that is sorted out, the taxman can go after everybody, people are still going to hide away. So I think we just need the top end to change, the delivery of services to be honest, the expenditure of the existing tax to be done in a transparent and honest manner, and then all of us will say, fine, even if I pay 40% or 50% tax, I know I do not then have to go and pay it myself.
There's a question here we were putting out to our viewers tonight, is that what are you willing to do on an individual capacity to aid in the fight against corruption? And we have receiving feedback, and there's one on Twitter at Kenya Al. This is a question directed to both of you. What exactly does this National Anti-Corruption Conference seek to achieve? I think that's a question we've tried to put across. So maybe we can just recap that as we come to a close. And also someone else says, yes, indeed, fighting corruption is not a one-day event, it is a process. Then someone actually acknowledges that, and that is same Kenya says, let's repatriate all the stolen money back to the country. That is maybe quoting what you had said. So maybe as we come to a close, let's elaborate what this conference sets to achieve, and going forward, what we need to do as a Kenya, as a people, in as far as looking inwards in the fight against corruption. Obath, then maybe Warari.
I'll just look at a simple thing. The outcome of the conference is not going to be studies or a report. The outcome of the conference is going to be every sector is going to be peer reviewed by other sectors to make sure that the actions that they have said they're going to take are realistic and that they're not hiding. And then we are going to hold each sector to account on the actions that they have promised to take to stop corruption in their own sector. So it is going to be shining a light on themselves. And we are going to be able to monitor that over the next 4 years to see whether they have really stopped themselves being the engine of corruption. That's one aspect, and I'll leave.
Yeah, thank you so very much. I'm a great advocate of the young people, the youth that forms about 41% of our nation. And we have reached out to the youth to participate in this two-day conference. And I want to tell you, the youth want the truth. The youth want transparency. The youth want service delivery. The youth want jobs. They want conducive environment to do their little hustles of the day. And so the conference here seeks to start a conversation, a national conversation. This conference wants to start a movement, and we are saying no to corruption. Simply saying it that no, we don't want corruption, and if you see corruption anywhere, report it, act, respond, because we must change. So this is the beginning of good things. It's going to be a long journey. There will be sweat. I don't want to say and blood, but
but it's going to be an uphill task.
Uphill task, and we thank God that our president has also reached there. He has said zero tolerance on corruption, and the church has also said, the business sector has also said. We need tourists to come to our nation. We need to make Kenya great again. And we can.
Very well said. I'll not try and water that down. Is that the National Anti-Corruption Conference is to be held on the 24th to the 25th of this month. That is next week, with the theme Pamoja Tuangamize Ufisadi. From our guest here, Engineer Patrick Obath, who is a co-convener of the Multi-Sectoral Initiative Against Corruption, and also Bishop John Warari, who is the Vice Chair of KBC Foundation, saying that it is the high time that we looked at corruption not as a vice to be fought from without, but from within. It is a moral, ethical issue that you and I have to come on board if at all Kenya is to go back to its greater days. Actually, if I may just borrow what the Bishop said, it is making Kenya great again, and we can only do that if we take up the fight against corruption on an individual, personal capacity.